After 40 years of cleaning up my brother's messes, I finally walked away. For as long as I can remember, my younger brother has been the center of every family crisis. Growing up, it started with little things. Money would disappear from wallets. Household items would go missing. Whenever he got caught, there was always an excuse. My parents insisted he was misunderstood and just needed more support. As the years passed, the problems became harder to ignore. He was eventually expelled from school after repeated incidents, and for a period of time, he was placed in a residential program for troubled teens. Most people assumed that would be a turning point in his life. It wasn't. Over the next 2 decades, he bounced from job to job. Sometimes he quit after a few weeks. Other times he was fired. No matter what happened, my parents stepped in to protect him from the consequences. When he wrecked my mother's car, they paid for it. When he ran out of money, they gave him more. When landlords or employers lost patience, my parents always found a way to help him start over. My brother was diagnosed with ADHD, but he never committed to treatment. Whenever things didn't go exactly the way he wanted, his temper would explode. Arguments became shouting matches. Small frustrations became full-scale meltdowns. About 10 years ago, he met a woman while traveling overseas. To everyone's surprise, the relationship became serious. She moved to our country to be with him, and eventually they had 2 children together. For a while, we thought maybe family life would help him settle down. Instead, the chaos continued. My parents even allowed them to live rent-free in an apartment they owned. Despite all that support, the police were called to their home multiple times because their arguments became so intense. A few years later, they decided to move to her home country. The house they purchased was largely funded by my mother's savings. Once again, my parents stepped in. After the move, my brother spent part of each year back here working seasonal jobs while staying with our mother. For the first time in years, it looked like he might finally be getting his life together. Then everything fell apart. 2 months ago, his wife told him she wanted a divorce. She had reached her limit after years of living with his unpredictable outbursts. The news devastated him. He became withdrawn and depressed. Doctors prescribed medication, but the medication made it impossible for him to continue working safely in his job. Before long, he lost his employment as well. I genuinely felt sorry for him. Despite everything that had happened over the years, he was still my brother. For weeks, he talked about admitting himself to a psychiatric clinic. Every conversation seemed to end the same way. He would say he needed help, but then complain that there were no available beds. At the same time, he began making comments that worried me. Comments that sounded less like frustration and more like someone considering harming himself. Concerned, I suggested contacting emergency services. I explained that professionals might be able to evaluate him and help him access treatment more quickly. Instead of listening to me, he called the authorities himself. He was briefly placed under psychiatric observation. A few hours later, he called me furious. According to him, the entire situation was somehow my fault. I couldn't believe it. The very person trying to help had suddenly become the villain. Still, I let it go. Then, a few nights ago, I received a phone call that changed everything. It was late. I was already preparing for bed because I had work early the next morning. On the other end of the line was an emergency doctor. She explained that after extensive effort, they had finally found an available place for my brother in a psychiatric clinic. The admission needed to happen immediately. Without hesitation, I got in my car. I drove across town in the middle of the night, picked him up, and took him to the facility. The entire drive he talked about how badly he needed help. He promised he was ready. He promised he would stay as long as necessary. For the first time, I thought maybe things were finally going to change. 2 days later, I learned the truth. During a conversation with my mother, she casually mentioned that my brother had already left the clinic. Apparently, he had checked himself out after only a day and a half because he didn't like being there. I was speechless. Months of crises. Countless phone calls. Emergency interventions. Middle-of-the-night drives. And the moment real help became available, he walked away from it. Something inside me finally snapped. I told my mother that I was done. Not done caring. Done rescuing. Done rearranging my life every time another disaster appeared. Done being expected to drop everything for someone who refuses to help himself. My mother was shocked by my reaction. But after 40 years of watching the same cycle repeat over and over again, I realized something important. You can't save someone who refuses to participate in their own rescue. And for the first time in my life, I chose to step away.